Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life-transforming while delivering a message of hope.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Today, we're going to go over a topic that was submitted. Is there a difference between parenting and grandparenting? Anybody want to join in? Or
As far as, is there a difference? I think there's a huge difference. Maybe. What do I know, right? I only have one grandkid. Well, I have two grandkids, but as far as I can see, there is a big difference only in the fact that you can spoil them, give them what they want, and then send them home and let their parents deal with them. As opposed to your own child, you spoil them and then you have to put up with that. And I'll go into it further, but what do you guys think?
So there's this thing that me and my sister, my little sister always said, because we noticed it. We were younger. I think I was 6th grade, so I was like 11 or 12. And I definitely felt that my mom did love my niece, my first niece, the most out of everybody. And that's what we'll always say. When she's giving the baby the most attention, I was like, oh my God, it's like you love her more than us. And then I don't know why we said it, but and I don't know how it made her feel. So if it made you feel bad, Mom, I'm sorry, but that's just how I felt, and I'm still not happy about it.
He was an only boy.
Out of 3 sisters.
Yeah.
Dang.
Wow.
3 sisters. Well, I think for when my mom, asking her oh, who's your favorite? She would never give us an answer, but I knew it was me. And even to this day, I know it was me. But when what do you call it? Talking about Atlas, even though he's the only one, I feel I wonder if once I have kids, if she's going to feel the same way, or because she says Atlas is my favorite grandchild as of right now, because that's the only one. Mm-hmm. But Ruth begs to differ that Kona is her first grandchild.
which is her dog.
It's only fair.
Well, I always said that I never had favorites with my kids. I have 5 of you, and I love you all just the same. And then the truth is,
Stop winking at Gio.
No, I'm not winking at Gio. But with Santee, because I hung out with him the most, we traveled a lot
Santee's
together.
the baby.
Actually, no. I'm not fencing up that Santee
I'm
was
sorry,
a
Gio.
Santee was
Sorry,
a
I found out
favorite.
this
Wow, she
I
said
lived
this.
a lie.
No. You are all my babies. I love you guys. You guys are still my babies, even though you guys are adults. But Santee, I keep saying, but
You
Santee,
keep saying
huh?
Santee.
No.
So he's listening to this and he's
Because
like, oh,
everybody
that's right.
thought, all of you
This is
thought
gonna be
Santee
Santee's favorite
originally was
podcast.
the favorite child, but Santee, he always thought he was the favorite because he traveled with me the most. So I don't know, but Atlas, he's the only one I did confess that yes, he's my favorite. He is my only grandchild, but yes, he's my favorite grandchild. But if I did have future grandchildren, I would love them all the same.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I do is I call Atlas my favorite, but then I realize that the next one coming along, he's my favorite too, or she's my favorite too, and so on. So they could all be your favorites at the same time. And I never said that before when we just had our kids, because you don't say stuff like that. That you have a favorite, but they could actually all be your favorites. Yeah. So just a play on words. But we have 2 out of 5 of our kids here on the microphones, and I wanted to ask you guys, what difference did you guys see in our parenting versus grandparenting?
I think for sure I feel like we were disciplined. And I think we were disciplined to the point where I think everyone saw hey, we had not saying Alice is not what do you call it, well mannered?
Yeah, he's well mannered.
No, yeah, so he's well mannered. I'm saying where discipline was heavy on us, but then I feel like Atlas, Mom was saying, he gets away with a whole bunch of stuff, and seeing it, I'm like, wait, what about us? Why did we have to pay? But then I think too, do you think because it's not your your own child, do you think that plays a difference on discipline?
For me, one of the things that kind of changes the game with a grandchild is that I don't feel that I have the right to do the discipline as if it was my kid.
Yeah.
When it's my kid, I feel okay, if they deserve a little swat on the butt, I'll do that. Or with Atlas, our grandson, I don't feel that I have that right, so I have to overcompensate by explaining more and doing things like that
Yeah.
that maybe I didn't do with my kids, which was you guys. So you guys were kind of the guinea pigs in a sense, not in a mean way, but we had to learn things that maybe now we can maybe do it a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd have to agree with that, Tony. But also, I raised 5 boys, and my first granddaughter was a girl. So it was a little easier to spoil her. It was a lot easier to spoil her. And I knew my place as a grandma and not to overstep those boundaries because I wanted my son. I want my son and the baby's mom, my granddaughter's mom, to be the parent. I think that's what I loved about being a grandparent, that I didn't have to discipline, that I didn't have to set those rules for the kids.
That's good.
And even if my children said, you treat her better, yes, I absolutely do, but that's because she's not my daughter. And it's because I get to play the grandma, and I get to let her get away with stuff that the parent is not supposed to, but I can because I'm the grandma. And it was easier for me to pick the granddaughter. It's easier for me because I tell my granddaughter, why do you think I love you so much? She's 7 now. And this has been since she was a baby. Why do you think Nana loves you so much? She said, Nana, because you only have boys, and well, you know how boys are. And me, I'm just a princess. So it's easier to love her. And we have the other one's only a few months old, 5 months. But I can almost imagine that when she turns her age where she's speaking, she will also say the same thing. And because when I see her, it's also the same thing. Oh, she's a favorite. I love her so much. But it's easier because I don't have to be the one disciplining.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. One of the other things that I noticed too in grandparenting is that because the discipline, like you said, Gio, isn't, as much on the table with my grandson that it was with you guys, is I think that, I don't know if it was the discipline because it happened, and I know at times I was heavy-handed when it came to discipline. And I don't know, I guess the relationship, I feel, kind of suffered a little bit because I think I was a little too heavy-handed with the discipline. Where with Atlas, it seems the opposite. And when I say, hey, Atlas, I almost rarely have to call him twice. He'll come running, tata, tata, tata. And there's like a kind of a sadness in my heart that I wish that was this case with all my kids. You know what I mean? It was part, and so going back, of course, I do things different. But one of the things that kind of crossed my mind on being a grandparent now is maybe this is a question we could kind of take a stab at trying to answer. Or maybe just the grandparents could answer this one. Do you think guilt plays a role in how you grandparent opposed to how you did your parenting? Because sometimes we want to make up for something we didn't do. Because that's kind of what I'm saying, what I just finished explaining, where I feel like, not that I'm driven by guilt, but there's still that little factor that, man, now I have an opportunity to make some things that weren't so great better.
Right.
What do you guys think?
No, I think you're right. I think there's truth to what you're saying. First of all, I do believe that healthy discipline, even a healthy spanking, is good for a child. I think it helps the process quicker than versus
I hope you still subscribe to this podcast.
as opposed to, like with Atlas, I've had to learn to over communicate, explain myself, talk to him more often. But even that there's still that foolishness that's bound up inside of him. But it seems like the process is longer, and there's just things that you have to work harder at, I think, without the discipline. And I'm not saying that, you beat your child or anything like that, because I think you can spank a child, not, if they do something absolutely that's deserving of a spanking, that could cause, them to get hurt or something like that, like even sticking a knife in a socket. They're not going to know and they're going to keep doing it. And sometimes just giving a good swat in the butt and saying, no, you're going to hurt yourself. And to me, that little sting or whatever at that moment causes them to change. And I know you guys agree that discipline isn't 100% bad. And you guys can actually share on that. Because no, I do strongly believe in discipline. A lot of people might disagree with me, but I do believe, looking at all 5 of our kids, they did turn out great. You guys aren't perfect, but you guys turned out pretty well,
A little disclaimer.
Yeah. But I think that I think the process is longer, but I think too, there's some things that, well, I think with the last 3 on my part, I think because I did a lot more things with you guys, and I you know what I mean? And Dad, I know you had to run the business and stuff like that a lot, and you gave me the freedom to do things with them. So I think with you guys and even with Atlas, I feel like, I don't know, I think I have to say that I pretty much had the opportunity to really enjoy my time with you guys.
Which is great. For me, we talked about this a little bit last time that we might disagree on this show with some things.
Yeah.
So for me, I actually raised 5 boys, and 3 of them I raised by myself. I was a single mom for many years, and my form of discipline was spanking. Sometimes even with the chancla or the belt, which I'm not proud of anymore. I do not believe in corporal punishment. Mm-hmm. I do not believe in that for this reason. Mm-hmm. I was spanked, and not just spanked, I was with everything that you can imagine. And I never understood how inflicting pain on an individual, you or somebody, the adult, was expecting a positive response from this child or this person. I believe in timeouts. I believe in sitting down and talking with the child. And there are some children, and it's got to be different. Sean has a comment here in a minute, but it's got to be different when you are the primary caregiver of the grandchild. That's a little different. And then you've learned over the years what's the best form of discipline for this child. So you'll be able to gear it better towards the child. And everybody's different. I agree with anything anybody else says. For my style, even with the granddaughter, we were at SeaWorld recently, and I said, if your daddy or one of your uncles would have done that, I would have spanked him. She said, well, thank God you're not my mom, because she doesn't know about being spanked. And then later on, we walked up to some games, and she said, Nana, would you have bought this for your kids? And I said, yeah. Okay, well, then I want one now. I was like, oh, okay, so we can get you this. But with her, it's been different. I'm sorry. With my first 3, I did spank. The last 2 have never received a spanking, not from me nor my husband. All my 5 kids have turned out okay. They're doing really great. So about the spanking, I can't weigh one way or the other. My personal preference is I don't spank for that reason, because I remember how it felt when I was young. Mm-hmm. And for the grandkid, I think when you're raising the grandkid, it's a little bit different, as opposed to having the grandkid come visit you and their parent has their way of disciplining the child.
That's good. Actually, can I jump in super quick? I just wanted to ask one quick question. When you had said that you don't agree with spanking, do you think it had anything to do with you having to wear both hats during that season where you had to discipline?
I do, Tony. I really, but more importantly, I was a really, really young mom, and all I knew was hitting. And for me, it was like, it was a hit on the head, the side, the shoulder, throw something at you to get your attention. So to me, when my children started growing up, the first one was an amazing child. He was such a good baby. There was no need to spank him. When the second one came around, love him to death, Christopher, he tested the waters, and he challenged me. So I remember him being 2 years old when I thought, am I going to have to spank him? Like, I actually had to think about it, because all I could remember was you get hit and that hurts, because I remembered. I was so young, I could still remember. But I do remember whacking him and thinking, okay, you got to get it. And he didn't. He didn't get it. But later on, when I had my other 2, my youngest 2, I was separated from my husband for a long time, their father. And spanking, I never went there. It's not something that I thought about. It was like taking them to the side and talking to them like, you understand that what you did was not right, or having a conversation with them. Even I know that a lot of times that I had conversations were beyond their maturity level, but I just feel like I believed it was something to do rather than spank. It didn't come into play at my age when the younger ones were younger, growing up.
Well, thinking about that, like when I grew up, though, I never was disciplined. I was actually a free child. Both my mom, my dad would work, 3 jobs a day, and my mom pretty much, she did her own thing. So pretty much all 5 of us kids grew up in a home with no discipline at all. And the times we did get disciplined, believe it or not, I have to say I appreciated it, because it did, to me, that changed my thinking and kept me from doing certain things, And I think that's why too, I think I had lack of discipline. And I think my life would have been a lot different, I think, if my parents had disciplined me a little bit more, but I think there's, like I said, a right way to discipline. Like I would never hit my kids in the head.
Right.
100%. That's, becomes abuse. I mean, to me, the bottom,
That's
is
it.
my,
Yeah.
my, the little spongy zone. But, and I wasn't more the disciplinary one, I have to say. I was the one who threatened my kids and said, when dad gets home, he's going to smack you guys, And,
That didn't help me.
And it didn't help him because I was instilling in my kids a fear of their dad, which it really didn't help anyways, because all I did was kept making him look bad and me look when I should have actually disciplined him at that moment when I had a chance.
You were able to wear
but-
your halo.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was talking with Jess, and I was thinking, because I don't want to be the bad guy, because dads usually are like, hey, you're the disciplinary, typically. But do you think there is always like that, almost like that bad guy, not bad guy, but the disciplinary?
Good cop, bad cop?
Good cop,
Yeah.
bad cop, yeah. Do you think there's always that in parenting?
Yes.
Do you think that there has to be?
Yeah, like, do you think it's necessary?
Of what?
Because to me, it's a bummer. Because I would hate for Jess to look like the bad cop, and I'm just the good cop. And
Actually, I'll say something real quick. If let's say you and Jess both agreed that at times you were going to discipline your kids in a loving way, I think there's a healthy way of doing it. There's not the wrong way is, like I said, if you're hitting them in the face or hitting them in certain places or slapping them. I mean, things like that, and yelling at them, and they're growing up in a house where there's foul language and everything's a negative word towards them. To me, it's like if you and Jess were in agreement, and that's one thing I think the biggest mistake with me and Dad, we were never in agreement in certain things. At times we were divided when it came to raising you guys in certain areas, and it's really important for you to come in agreement and be united when it comes to raising your kids together and what you both agree on. But I think the loving and the nurturing, if that outweighs everything else, then you have nothing to worry about, because I think it's a lot of it has to do with the nurturing and the loving, because I think after Dad would discipline, I was the one that always stepped in and loved and nurtured and said, hey, but there was a season though where Dad would turn around, and you guys wouldn't remember, but he would sit, well, I guess it was you or Anthony, and it was a short season, but you would explain to them, do you know why I disciplined you? Do you know what you did wrong? And he helped you guys understand, okay, this is why you did it. But then he would always finish it, I really, I love you. But I was always the over nurturing one, because I would always feel bad, like, oh, you got spanked. But I would say, why, and I would kind of repeat what he said, but then the love and the nurturing would step in after that.
Do you think
anyways.
that's why grandparents are like different towards the, of course, the grandkids and their kids, because they don't have to be a good cop or a bad cop; they can just be the good cop at all times?
Well, with our grandkids, sometimes I feel like I have to be the good cop, bad cop. His parents parent a little different than I do, and there's certain things that I don't allow in my home. And I have to teach that to my grandson. I have to explain to him why I don't allow certain things in my home, or certain talk, or certain vocabulary words. He's not, I don't allow him to say like stupid and, dumb and things like that, and things that he picks up. For even a few times he said the word, you're a jerk. So little things like that, I don't allow my kids to speak like that, and so it's really now I'm kind of in the middle trying to explain to him, okay, this is not how we talk here. But now it's gotten to the point where he's getting a little older now, so he's understanding more. But all around, he's a good kid, you know what I mean? And he's a very good listener, and he, for the most part, 100%, well, I'm gonna say 100%, but he's pretty obedient and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Ruth, how do you think discipline either helped or didn't help? Like, what role do you think discipline should be in parenting, but on the receiving end? You know what I mean? Like how mom and dad disciplined you guys. I know it wasn't always the right way, but at the end of the day, looking back, how do you reflect on the discipline you had? That's probably the better way to word the question.
I think looking back, there were times where I don't think it was the healthiest way of discipline. I think if anything, it instilled fear in me to not do things, not because I shouldn't, but because I can't, because I'm gonna get hit. But then I do remember the few times, like Mom talked about, where you would explain to me why I shouldn't do certain things. which I think kind of goes hand in hand because I see how you guys over-explain to Aunt Atlas and how he like soaks it in. He's like, oh, okay, that's why I shouldn't do it because that's dangerous. Rather than me, it's like you get smacked and then it's like, okay, well, just don't do it again. I'm like, but why? So I think, but I think looking back, I'm grateful because I see, other people that are my age that went through a lot, but it was because I'm not choking up. I'm just waking up. I think I look back at people my age and they went through a lot, but it was because they had so much freedom and no discipline. So I see both sides of it. And I think there is a healthy form of discipline, but I think it starts with communication.
Yeah.
Because if not, I think it can almost become abuse. But people don't realize it and they try to label it as discipline. I mean, in the end, I learned along the way, but there were times where I was just like, don't do it. And I never knew why until I got older. And then I kind of picked it up for myself. I was like, oh, that's why I shouldn't do da-da-da-da-da. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I noticed in grandparenting now that my explanation for why is taking place, or that I'm explaining the why more than I did in my parenting days. Not that I'm not parenting now, but I think I sit back and feel like I got to bring the why to the table more now, even in parenting. And in parenting now, all you guys are old enough, adults now. And now, instead of me saying this is what you should do in our conversations that I have with all of you guys, I'll present it and say, it's your choice, but let me help lay out the information on the table for you, and you make the decision based on, the information we just talked about, and then knowing it's your choice. And I think I really wish I would have done that a lot sooner.
And you know what, Tony? I thank you so much for that explanation because it does make a lot of sense. And Gio, I'm going to go back to your question a little bit. But Tony, what you just said right now is when we raise our children in that type of environment where we're constantly having that open communication with them, a child is not going to go off the deep end and do something so unreasonable that it causes a spanking. So when you're in that environment where there's we're couples and sometimes yelling happens, but if overall you live in a calm upbringing, a child isn't prone to get up and do something when they're little. When they grow up, they're going to go do whatever they want to do. And a lot of times, like, don't blame the parent. We did the best we could. But in a nurturing environment, when, like what you just said right now, it would be very untypical for Atlas to act out in your home like a child that's going to get something and start throwing it. And you're like, where did this come from? Because that's not what you represent, and that's not what you're showing them in the home. A lot of times, as you guys know, I work with children. So we go into a home and we see the mom yelling, the dad yelling, and there's a lot of cussing, and there's stuff being thrown around. And they don't understand why the child is doing it. And I'm like, you really don't get why your child is acting this way? Yeah. And they don't. They really don't. It's like you are modeling to this child at 2 years old that it's okay to have tantrums, to yell. You are modeling to him that it's okay to eat at some people don't like if you eat in the living room. You're modeling this to him to go eat in the bedroom, and now you're upset because your child is doing it. But if a lot of adults, parents, take a step back and they're like, let me see what I'm doing and where this child is learning this. So we're quick to blame media and blame somebody else, but a lot of times it's us, the ones that are raising these children, that have to take ownership for how we're raising them. So I thank you for that, because it is true. When we sit down, we set almost a momentum for this grandchild and the grandchildren to come, that this is what's expected. Because I love what you said, Ida. In my home, this is not accepted. In my home, we have rules, basically. And but you're setting that momentum. So when Atlas comes over, he already knows, okay, here, I already know how I'm supposed to act. So he's not just going to do something, that you're going to be like surprised that he did it. That's what I believe when you have that open communication with a child. And now I want to go back to Gio with the question that you asked. I hope that one day we can actually do one of these podcasts for young married adults, young single adults. Gio, like somebody said earlier, communication is key. And when you and your significant other, she's your wife now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you and your wife, when you start planning that parenting phase, you're going to, sometimes it comes on you don't even think about it. You're going to pick up a little bit of what your parents taught you, and she's going to pick up a little bit about what her parents taught her. And then you come together, and then you guys all do your own thing. But it's always having that communication. Like, don't tell the kid that I'm going to be the one to spank them because I'm not, or don't tell them that I'm going to be the disciplinary because it's true. What I've seen a lot is that they are scared of that one parent, the disciplinary, but they have more respect for them. It's almost like, so there's more respect there. So it's kind of like a win-win at the end of the day and when the child grows up. But I think that open communication in the beginning, when you start planning a family, it's, how are we going to discipline the child? And that conversation has to take place when you're thinking about starting a family. So I don't know if that helps or not, but
because if I could add one more thing to what Mary said, because I was going to say it earlier too, but when you're asking about the good cop, bad cop, just like Mary said, if you're communicating and if you guys could stay at a good, equal outlook on the discipline that you're both going to participate in it, then you don't have to overcompensate and have the good cop, bad cop. So that could be a different way of looking at it. But one other thing, I know we're saying that communication is key, but one thing that I think is coupled with that communication is time spent.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and why I say that is because, let me share a quick story. I grew up without my dad, and most of my I had two uncles and two aunts that were really there for me growing up on my mom's side of the family. And my two uncles were kind of like the two guardrails for my life that would kind of keep me in track. And then I have my aunts that just loved on me. But one in particular, the situation came up. I had an uncle that always spent time with me since I was a little kid, taking me everywhere. And it was that time spent. And I remember the communication too, but I remember more the time spent, because when there's time spent, the communication's automatically there. You know, it should be. And one time, this is the worst discipline that I had in my life. And it did not involve a spanking. But my mom, when she would discipline me, it was almost like what you were saying, Mary, it was overboard all the time. But here was the biggest discipline I had in my life. I turned around. I was living with my grandmother at the time. She was kind of like raising me. I lived with her. I turned around and something happened where I got a little upset with her. And I love her. She was God sent to our family. One time I got upset and I had told her, Grandma, I don't like your cooking. And I said, that was the worst thing I ever said to her. I've never disrespected her. Beyond that, that was the worst thing that happened or that I've said to her. And to a woman, those are fighting words. And I didn't realize that. It was hard for me to be mean, but I was upset at the moment. So the next thing I know is that one of my uncles turns around and she called my uncle, and the one that had spent, a whole lot of time with me, he turned around and I heard he was coming over after work. I was sweating bullets till he got there. Then when he got there, he walks in the door. I'm in the living room, and I'm in elementary at the time. I don't remember what grade. He walks in, shuts the door, looks at me straight in my face across the living room. He says, Tony. I go, yeah. He goes, you know you hurt my mom. And I was like, mm-hmm. And my ears just welled up with water, tears. And then he turns around.
Your eyes?
Huh? Yeah, my eyes. Yeah. Oh, my ears? Okay, my eyes. I wasn't that dysfunctional. And he turns around and he goes in the living room, goes right in the middle of the floor, sits down on his knees, puts his hands in his pockets, and looks at me, takes off his glasses, and says, here, is there something that you want to let out? Is there something else you want to do or call my mom? Come, I'm right here. And I turned around and I just started bawling. He goes, what's the matter? What's the matter? Don't you want to turn around and tell her how bad of a grandma she is to you and this and that? And I was choked up because my grandmother meant everything to me. And then here's this guy in front of me that means the world to me telling me the same thing. He goes, come here. Why don't you hit me? And I just started crying. I go, I can't. And he turns around and he goes, come on, hit me. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And he goes, why? And I just got so choked up. I just fell apart right there in the living room. And I was just like, oh my God. And I never, ever came close to saying a word like that to my grandmother again. But here comes the highest form of discipline where he didn't touch me. It was just a heart-to-heart, correction.
Right.
And that just, I wanted to share that for a reason, because imagine if we parent and grandparent with that same heart, investing that same time, that same communication. There would be no chaos in family.
Exactly.
I want to bring something up that Mary said about being the disciplined primary caregiver, and then kind of piggybacking on what Tony said about you said that your grandma was raising you. So I guess it's like a two-part question. How do you think the grandparents feel when they're raising their grandkids from when they're a baby all the way into 18 to adulthood? And then how do you think the grandparents feel when they're grandparenting their grandkids for the first 5-6 years of their lives, and then something happens to where they have to now parent the grandkids? 1 minute they were being the grandparent, now I have to parent you. So how do you think what do you think the mind process is for the grandparent at those two separate times?
I would say, Sean, that as a grandparent parenting a grandchild until the time they're 18, a lot of grandparents won't see it as me being the grandparent. They take the role of being the parent because for whatever reason, the parent isn't there. So it's a lot easier when you have the authority to do it, to be able to bring in the discipline, to bring in your type of parenting to this child. And that's what I think for when you're raising a child from birth to 18 and you're the grandparent. You had no choice. So you have to go in and take that role. Now, for a parent who started raising a child, you said, and then at age 5 or what?
They were grandparenting, they were the grandparents. They weren't they had no obligation, but they didn't have to raise the kid.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't until something happened 5 6 later they're being a grandparent to this kid for the first 5 6 7 years of their life. But something happens and then bam, they have to be the parent now.
Now they have to be the parent. So that's going to be a little tricky because the child is used to this person being their grandparent. So discipline and everything else is not going to fall in line like it would have had that person been raising them since they were birth. So what the grandparent has to keep in mind is always that fine line that I want to do the best for this child, and I don't know how you do this, but don't get emotionally attached because that child is probably going to go home with the parent. There's just a situation right now. And it's really hard for the grandparent to cross those lines okay, I want to be a parent, but I'm a grandparent, and you'll see them struggle a lot. But it's because you're the adult, when you're a grandparent, you have to take on that role and say, you know what, I know I had to step into these shoes that I wasn't called to do, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the best at it without getting your feelings hurt and getting so involved that now you're even telling the child's parent what you're going to do and not do. And I think that's a fine line. It's really tricky, and not a lot of parents can do it, but it's something that has to get done to keep the chaos from happening within the family.
I think one of the other things too that I kind of look at in parenting, and if you had to step in and become a parent to your grandparent, to your grandchild, I think one of the things that I look for now, and me and my wife talk about it, is that the more time we spend with our grandson at this point, is our influence is growing in his life.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
So I look at the influence factor. That okay, if I have a better opportunity to influence him, then that's what I'm going to go for.
Right.
And I noticed that when my grandson stays away a little too long, he comes back and it takes a little longer to get in alignment again, and then he's good again. So I always look at when he's around, I want to be influencing him. And I think that it's kind of like being intentional on pouring into him.
Right. How to positively influence.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. And I know we're wrapping up. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Just remember, grandparenting and parenting is not the same thing, but as long as we do it with unconditional love, both of them, as long as we set those boundaries and we allow a child to be a child by nurturing and loving, I think this world would be a lot greater. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, especially if you're a grandparent raising a child, reach out to us. Been there, done that for some of us, but we have the information to back you up if you need it. Thank you.
Thank you.